And thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us once again across the Louisiana plain, where we are elevating the cause of constitutional conservatism in Louisiana, elevating the cause of constitutional conservative citizens across the state, and rapidly now draining the Louisiana swamp. My name is Chris.
And I'm Danielle, and this is the State of Freedom, brought to you by freedom-loving Louisiana First Patriots. Hello, State of Freedom warriors. Thank you for inviting us to be part of your day. We are so grateful for you. You're the best listening family anyone could possibly hope for, and we are only here because of your encouragement, your prayers, and your financial support. If you are looking for a way to support us, to advertise with us, or to send us feedback, please visit our website at freedomstate.us. We'd really appreciate it if you'd also help us get the word out and spread the reach of the State of Freedom. Please like the show on whatever platform you listen to us, subscribe to it, and share it. You can share short clips instead of the full episodes from our YouTube and Rumble channels, and links to those are always in the show notes and over on freedomstate.us. Today, we are excited to have Joe Donahue join the show. He's the new head of the Louisiana Department of Transportation. We're thrilled that he's leading reform efforts at the department, and we have a lot of questions for him. Before we get to those questions, let me read the scripture of the day. It's Proverbs chapter 14, verse 4. And it says, "The only clean stable is an empty stable." So if you want the work of an ox and to enjoy an abundant harvest, you'll have a mess or two to clean up. And the scripture made me smile this morning because it's a great reminder, especially in politics and political advocacy, really for anyone who's fighting for the truth in any venue. If we want a productive, fruitful life, it will be messy sometimes and it will stink sometimes, but we will continually have something to show for our efforts. And the converse is also true. If we want our lives to be neat and tidy, we can live in a way where we don't have any messes to clean up, but we're not going to have anything to show for it. So let this be an encouragement to all of you out there who are fighting the good fight for truth and righteousness. You will see the fruit of your labor. It may be messy, but keep going.
Absolutely. You know, it's interesting. The only people who have a clean stable, Danielle, are those who are not doing anything. One of my favorite quotes is someone I can't really quote it, but he basically says that a lot of people spend most of their lives waiting for the perfect time to start doing something. And they never get there because, you know what? There is no perfect time to start doing something. We got to jump in the fray and move forward and do the best we can. Speaking of someone who has always been in the fray, most recently as an assistant attorney general before he moved over as director of DOTD, is Joe Donahue. Such a pleasure to have you here with us, Joe, to address some of these issues, specifically about the massive I-10 widening project, which I'm sure is keeping you busy. It's great to have you on with us.
Absolutely. It's great to be here, Chris and Danielle. Very, very happy to talk with y'all and give you any information that you'd like. You know, I've only been in the position a little less than 2 months now, but as Chris alluded to, I've been very involved with DOTD's projects while I was an assistant attorney general and when I was at the department previously. So I'm ready to get on into it.
One of the big questions that people have, Joe, and I'm sure that you've probably heard this more than one time from citizens, they hear about this project, they hear about the possibility of, reducing the interstate I-10 corridor to one lane each direction. We already have enormous traffic infrastructure problems. So the first question out the box here, Joe, what in your assessment does this I-10 widening project, will it stand to have on the citizens' quality of life, people trying to get to and from the doctor, truckers trying to get through here to go to Mississippi or elsewhere, people trying to go on vacation, as I said, people trying to get to a doctor or to work? What are your thoughts on the impact, both economic and on the quality of life to Louisiana citizens that this big project could bring?
So sure, and Chris, you know better than most probably that what you're talking about was the primary concern with the project that I and both the now governor expressed, over a year ago, 2 years ago probably at this point. But and those were primarily related to plans to reduce the existing capacity on the interstate. If you don't have those lanes and that space for those vehicles to move, they're going to go on surface streets, and there were no studies that were done as to what effect that would have on the ability of folks to get around and do those essential tasks that you were talking about. The plans, and through my efforts and those of the then Attorney General, now Governor, DOTD, even prior to the administration taking office in January, had abandoned the plan to restrict access on I-10. And so
Can I
the plan
cheer,
is to
please? I need to start cheering right now, Joe. Uh, and Joe, let me say this. I think it was because of excuse me, but that was because of a very powerful letter that I had the opportunity to read that the Attorney General wrote in response to public concern, and I guarantee you had something to do with that. Do you know what letter I'm talking about?
There were a couple of them, but you're probably talking about the first one that was sent, if I had to guess. Yes, it was unfortunate the response that came from DOTD too. And I've told folks this. I addressed the Baton Rouge Metro Council, and what I told them was, we could get into all the details and all of the specifics and all of the legal intricacies. To me, it really came down to stuff that is kindergarten level. For years, the department and Sean Wilson specifically went out there and told people that they would maintain existing capacity on the interstate throughout the duration of this project. That was included in the environmental approval, included in the environmental documents. As soon as they got that approval, they turned around and did exactly what they had said for years that they were not going to do. So it is really just do what you say you're going to do. Allow the people to express their opinions and take that input and go back and make your decision, but don't try to deceive people and get to the point where you get to move forward and do it how you want to, and then just forget all of those commitments that you were making along the way. And so, that again, I find that very basic and fundamental in particularly a public servant, and absolutely the head of a state agency. And so, I was very happy to see that they had made that decision prior to the change of administration to actually go back to those commitments that they had made to the public and numerous local officials going back, a decade or more.
Yeah. So obviously, the change now that will exclude the reduction of the interstate to one lane in each direction will likely have a positive impact on the economy, probably the quality of life, because people, at least ostensibly, will be able to move around better. But here's my question, Joe. My understanding is this, correct me if I'm wrong. Does federal law or state law or any regulation require economic and quality of life studies to be done before these massive transportation projects begin, or are they required to be done on the back end?
So those are absolutely considerations that have to be taken in connection with the NEPA review. Your typical environmental review. NEPA stands for the National Environmental Policy Act. And so, in the one for this project, the thinking was, okay, if you're maintaining existing capacity, then the only real impact that you will have is typical construction delays, because you're not diverting all of this traffic onto surface streets with all of the planning and necessities that would accompany that decision. And so that was absolutely crucial and critical in obtaining that environmental approval. And so, the thinking is, and again, I was not there and involved with that, but the thinking by DOTD and the federal government in granting that approval was, the benefits that you receive from getting this increase in capacity, and the requirement that you maintain existing capacity while you're providing that improvement, works a net benefit. And really, the only net the impact is going to be of any typical construction project. And so, that analysis was, and those considerations were taken under, advisement during the environmental process. And that was what resulted in the determination that there was no significant impact that would result as long as you maintained existing capacity throughout the duration of construction.
Which of course, as you mentioned a minute ago, they didn't do because they changed the plans.
That's correct. And I'll tell you, it's not as if because they made that specific change that there are not other issues with this project that continue to be looked into, particularly by me. I have some very other specific concerns, different concerns at this point now that I'm in the building, and some of them are related. Again, there was a lot of decisions that were made to try to defend that option that they were planning to implement to restrict the lane capacity. It has resulted in the estimated cost of the project skyrocketing, and the design work that is required to be doing that being delayed. And that's from vacillating and switching plans, adding things that would try to alleviate the impacts that were resulting from that decision to restrict lane capacity. So it really has become a mess. And what was really, I think, a good project, and if they had just proceeded with it down that path that they had laid the groundwork for, we wouldn't be in the circumstances that we are today. But I'm not going to sugarcoat it, and I'm going to tell you that it is still a bit of a mess.
Yeah. Yeah. So, Joe, I just want to make sure that for our listeners, we're understanding this correctly. If DOTD at the outset had said, well, this is going to involve reducing the I-10 corridor to one lane in each direction for miles, which will require vehicles to exit and travel down surface streets and all the rest of it, if they had said that, would a more in-depth economic impact study, quality of life study have been warranted? Or not? Or would anything have changed with regard to that study beforehand?
Absolutely. There is no doubt in my mind. And it's, it would have kicked everything into the greater depth of study. So again, I was talking about what was issued was the federal government said, we find no significant impact under your plan. That means that you're in an environmental assessment, which is a fairly innocuous, surface kind of analysis. Not to discount it because it is thorough, but at the same time, it is much less onerous than an environmental impact study. And there is no possible way, no doubt in my mind, that if it had been proposed that we are going to reduce existing capacity, that would have resulted in a significant impact, which would have required that higher level of study, which would have taken longer, which would have included a much more in-depth analysis of all of the factors, not just those that you mentioned, but everything from tip to tail with the project. Would have taken a lot longer, would have cost a lot more money. And the reason that they were able to move it along as they did was based upon that commitment to not reduce the capacity.
And the federal government assumes that when you submit a plan, you're being honest?
Absolutely, I would hope so. I mean, as a civil
That's a
servant
great
and a
question.
government employee, I mean, I think that's integrity and honesty is absolutely essential. I think it's not only mandated by law. I think that me as a person and my morality, that is something that is absolutely integral to my personhood. So I demand that of the folks that work for me for sure. But I've always provided that when when I've worked for others, and in most capacities that I've had, whether it was in public service or not. But it really is essential in a public servant to be honest and straightforward with the public in particular. The Louisiana revised statutes, they say the Secretary of DOTD, make it explicit, is answerable to both the legislature and the public. And I think that's one of the things that I bring to this position is I do have a legal understanding of how government operates at its most essential state. And so again, honesty and integrity and transparency, like you mentioned, are 100% necessities at all levels of government.
Great. Thanks, Joe. And maybe to switch gears a little bit, I'm from Terrebonne, and one of the things that has really been on my mind is Is there any consideration as to whether we're even using the right materials for road construction? We see down here that the sugarcane trucks are tearing up the roads. If you take Highway 90 as an example, the need for repairs on Highway 90 are perennial. I mean, you can never drive down Highway 90, it seems, without some kind of construction process going on. What's your take on that?
Well, for the specific to the the cane trucks, DOTD, there's legislation that places weight limits, and there's a permitting process for overweight loads and all of this, and the legislature itself has carved out certain exceptions for certain different types of transit and carrying and delivery and trucking, and cane is one of those. Of course, Louisiana is a big sugar state, and so and I'm not saying that's inappropriate that they've done that. That is definitely within their authority. With the associated question of the materials, we have our spec book, and that largely dictates what materials are acceptable and what is used in what instance. That goes through as part of our relationship with the federal government, and the fact that we largely implement a federal program. They approve that, but those specs and those requirements, they're typically reviewed on about a decade basis. So we've got our spec book, and it is looked at in between those 10-year periods. But about every 10 years, there is a concerted effort to go out and look at those and see what is appropriate and whether changes are necessary. And so it's a good opportunity that as I'm coming in, we're entering that 10-year period right now and going into that process. And so, the way that it's been done in the past will likely change again, because from my perspective, that is a typical rule. We're setting out the requirements that are going to affect the people that both are contracted with the department to do this work, but also the traveling public to whom we own duties. And so, this will be something where we come up and we take, advice and input from industry and making the changes that we think are appropriate. But then once we get that document in place, we put that out there for the public for comment on what they think is appropriate. Understanding, of course, that at the end of the day, the federal government has to sign off on it too. And we have to get their approval to make certain that we are staying within our duties that we owe in our fulfillment of basically those federal requirements that we assume in order to get the federal funding for our roads and bridges.
And you had mentioned the integrity and honesty that you not only bring to the job, but that you demand of the department. How is that going to translate into the contracting process?
So, and it depends on the type of contract. Chris had kind of alluded to this when we were discussing briefly earlier, but there are multiple different contracting methods that the department uses. The standard and the one that's been in place for decades is our design bid build process, and that honestly it works very, very well. I was talking with the chief engineer just this week, and typically, if there is a change order or anything in those projects, our average is about 3 to 4% cost differential from what is bid and what the ultimate cost is. Where you get into some gray area is in what we call alternative delivery or innovative procurement, where actually the executive of the department, the secretary, really has a lot of input, and it's not a low bid process like the design bid build is. And so we are talking about your design build, your construction management at risk or CMAR, and your public-private partnerships. And those are not low bid. Those are basically a type of best value type of determination. And in that same conversation that I was having with the chief engineer, the discussion was about accountability from my perspective, because you've got the CEO of the department, the secretary, who is actually putting their fingers in the decision-making process along the way after these contracts are executed, which goes back to what I was talking about with I-10 and the escalation of costs and all of these things that were, changes were made and then unmade, and then different changes were made, and that just skyrockets the cost. And so my point to the engineers was, look, if this is a decision that is being made by the secretary of DOTD, he should be accountable for it. And so I should be required to sign off on those changes that are making these detrimental aspects of the project, making the cost overruns and the delays in time and delivery. And so that's from my perspective is the way it should be. Everybody has some realm of responsibility, and you should be held accountable for fulfilling your duties in that role. And when you fall short, there need to be consequences. And currently, the way that it's set up, and it will require culture change at the department, but it is set up to where the secretary is very much insulated by the civil servants that work for him. And I fully expect and have told the legislature that you can hold me accountable for the decisions that I make, and I will be honest with, and I'm not going to be right every single time. And whenever I make a mistake, I hope that I'm able to explain at least my thought process as why I made the decision that I did, and I will accept responsibility when it doesn't turn out the way that I expected it to. So there are a lot of changes that are underway for the department. I honestly think that much of the issues that I had spied from both the time that I was at the department previously and the time that I was outside of the department, they really do lie on the administration and the folks at the top. And their decisions to sideline certain parts of the organization, particularly the legal department, and do things in a ends oriented fashion. This I know what the result is that I want. I don't care what process it is that we use to get there. And so it really is re-educating people on there is a reason why our existing processes are in place, and the secretary cannot waive statutory requirements, nor can he waive requirements that are in the administrative code. Those things are there for a reason. They were done through a process in which public input was there, and we all answer to the legislature. And as the executive branch, we're only implementing the laws that the legislature has passed. And so that needs to be given proper consideration and due respect.
Yeah. And ultimately, we're talking, Joe, about how billions of dollars of taxpayer money is being handled. And your suggestion that you maintain a degree of oversight over changes that involve increases in prices or construction costs is so important. Otherwise, you have people out there, construction companies, engineering companies, basically with a blank check, with no accountability. And I think that is so important that you maintain that degree of oversight that you're talking about in your office.
I'm excited to share a fantastic opportunity for State of Freedom listeners who are interested in investing in precious metals or even starting a home-based business in the precious metals industry. Metal Stacks is a precious metals collectors club where you can buy your metals at the best prices on the market, actual dealer cost. They are beating the big sites. They have no credit card fees and no minimums. If you're just interested in purchasing metals at a great price, visit metalstacks.com/dwalker. Get to shopping, that helps me out. I get the commission. You can also refer people to Metal Stacks for an additional income. If you're interested in learning about the referral business aspect of Metal Stacks, email me directly at danielle@freedomstate.us for more information.
I want to ask you a little more specifically about the contracts. The contracts that are being awarded or will be awarded with regard to this particular project, the I-10 widening project, those are CMAR projects, construction management at risk. Is that the type of process we're talking about there?
That is the type of contract, yes. And so there is already a contract that's executed. And so the way the CMAR process works, which the average person on the street would not have a great appreciation of this, but there's two portions. There's the pre-construction phase and then the construction phase. And so we are currently in the pre-construction phase. And the role of the contractor at that point is to advise the designers and provide constructability input. So the thinking is basically, in our typical design bid build, we put out a complete set of plans that a contractor bids on and says, we're going to build it to your design and your specs. And so when there's some error in those plans that causes the contractor to spend more money or make changes, all of that cost is paid and the risk is borne by DOTD. The taxpayers end up paying for the any errors in the design, or if you get out there and the situation is different different than what you had anticipated. So the thinking with CMAR is during this initial phase, the pre-construction phase, you bring the contractor in to give some input in that design process, and thereby you remove some of those issues that you wouldn't otherwise find until you already hired somebody to go out there and build what's been designed. And then as part of the process, once you get that full set of complete plans, that contractor who is brought on board to participate in the design process basically has a captive audience. And so they get to bid without any other folks having the opportunity. We have an independent cost estimator that advises the department as to what is reasonable and what is not. But the contractor will not make any money on the fee that they are paid for that pre-construction services support. And so whenever it comes time to actually bid the construction project, they basically get a right of first refusal. They get the first ability to convince the department that they are the best one to go with. And then if there's not an agreement that's reached, then it basically goes into our typical design bid build process. So we've got a complete set of plans now. We put it out there, and it's a low bid. The lowest bidder comes out. I'll tell you, you mentioned I-10 and the CMAR process and the purpose of that project delivery method, that contracting scheme, has not been fulfilled. You can see that there is construction that's going on right now.
Definitely can see it
Yes.
in Baton Rouge.
And we have not reached that point where we have final plans. So again, if you're going out there and you're doing work, and there is the ability to do certain amounts of things out in the field while you're still in that pre-construction services phase. You can go out there and locate utilities. You can go out there and do soil testing. You can go out there and drill test shafts to get more information that will inform the design. But the fact that we have not reached 100% set of design plans for even segment one of this project, but are out there spending millions and millions of dollars on construction when we do not have that design yet finished, and do not have that, it's called a GMP, a guaranteed maximum price from the contractor, you have lost all of the benefits that the CMAR process provides. And that's my opinion. And again, that is the issue that, I mentioned that there are other issues aside from those that I had addressed previously, but that's the first time I've stated that publicly for sure. So hopefully I gave y'all a little bit of an exclusive, but there are issues, and not to say that the project is, the plug is going to be pulled on it, but there are absolutely issues that need to be addressed given those cost overruns and the loss of the benefit of the CMAR process in the way that it has progressed up to this point.
Yeah. Joe, the contractor who is involved early in the process, sort of in the design part of it, the pre-construction part of it, as you described, how is that contractor, twofold question, how is that contractor chosen? And is the likelihood greater that whatever contracting firm is involved early in the process, pre-construction, does that increase the likelihood that that contractor is going to be granted the ultimate contract to build?
So I'm going to take the second part of your question first, because that was what I was trying to convey a second ago, is that the contractor who is selected, they're referred to as the CMAR contractor, and I'll get into the process of how they're selected in just a second. But they have, once you get to that final set of plans, you try to negotiate only with them to get to the construction services. And so the work that they've put in, likely at a loss during that pre-construction services phase, that is the benefit that they
because
get.
They're not being paid.
They get paid. And, I think that the fee for I-10, again, was, I believe, about $3 million for entirety of phase one and phase two. Again, the time and the personnel that they devote to the pre-construction services phase it will greatly be much, much more than that $3 million. But the reason that firms bid on that and want to participate in the process is that that ability to try to negotiate that construction services contract. So they're the ones that are trying to negotiate that with the department without competition, but with the department's independent cost estimator telling us what is reasonable and what is not, whether this is a good deal, whether it's not. And so that process goes on throughout the pre-construction services phase, at 30%, 60%, 90% plans, and then you ultimately get to your guaranteed maximum price to construct the project. Now, back to the first part of your question, the way that they are selected, and it's set by statute. It's the legislature who set out the process. But just from a practical perspective, the department puts out a notice that we're going to be doing this CMAR project. Please send us a letter if you're interested, in a contracting community in participating and wanting to compete. And so we basically issue it's a RFQ, request for qualifications. And so it is that the each of the contractors will put together a document. It's a statement of qualifications, and to demonstrate to the department that they will provide the best sort. They are the best contractor for this job, basically. So they will have all sorts of information. They will identify the personnel that work for them that will be assigned to the project. They demonstrate that they have the financial capacity to undertake it and the means, and that they've done it in the past. And we have, the way the legislature has done it is that there are subject matter experts within the department that are assigned to a committee, and then there are one individual from the contracting community and one individual from the design consultant community that are assigned to the committee, who then review those statements of qualifications that are submitted by the interested firms and assign scores. And whoever receives the highest score from those evaluations, the recommendation comes to the secretary that this is the appropriate firm for this job. And typically, and I will say it's not required, but in every instance that I'm aware of, and DOTD has only done 2 CMAR projects. The I-10 one is actually, I take that back. I think there's been a third one as well that is in the very early stages. The first one is the Comite Diversion Canal. I-10 was the second CMAR. But in every instance, the secretary has made the decision to contract with the entity that was recommended by the committee.
Okay. And so the committee makes the recommendation, and then the secretary makes the final determination. One final question on this. Do we know who's on the committee that makes the recommendation?
That's all a matter of public record. And I do believe it's at least issued in the request for qualifications. It may actually be identified early on in the notice of the project. But if it's not available, that notice of intent is typically posted on the department's website. The request for qualifications is typically only issued to the folks that submit a letter of intent in response to that notice. But it's absolutely, particularly once the contract has been executed, is a public record. And so that is available to anyone who asks for it. So that is a public document. Yep.
Okay. I have one final question on this, not on the contract, but just a more general question, and then Danielle may want to close out. As it stands now, Joe, for citizens who are listening, for citizens who want to know, and maybe want to be reassured going forward about how all of this is going to affect their quality of life, their mobility, their economic livelihood, their professional life. What would you say, sort of, to reassure them going forward about trying to minimize any adverse effects on their lives or on their families?
What I would tell them, Chris, is that I was very dedicated to that specific aspect of this project long before I was ever in the role that I've undertaken now. And that just because I'm now sitting in this chair doesn't mean that any of that has changed. And I absolutely am committed to making certain that that does not change. And that this project, again, having been determined, will have no significant impact, to do everything in my power to make certain that that remains true.
Great. Joe, thank you so much. You've been so gracious with your time. We have tons of more questions we want to ask you, so we'll have you back on soon when your schedule allows, so we can get some of those questions answered. But in the meantime, how can people follow the work that you're doing? Are you on Twitter or any other place that people can maybe keep up with what's happening at DOTD?
I will tell you that I am not a social media person. I know that is a bit of a change from some of the prior DOTD secretaries, but my communications director likely, he is great, and I have to say DOTD communications has always been excellent from my perspective. But I may have to speak with him and tell him that I do need to get some of that stuff because I've kind of been a little bit leery of it in the past, but it may be about time and appropriate for me to have a bit more presence on those platforms. So
All right. Well, we'll stay tuned.
We will stay tuned. And there were a lot of people, Joe, who were very happy when the governor appointed you to the position that you're in. We're very happy you're there. And we know we're in good hands. And so God bless you. Good luck on all of your work. And we hope to follow up with you soon.
Thank you, Joe. Take care. Have a great weekend. I'm just so excited that there's someone who cares about the state, who cares about honesty and integrity and getting the job done right the first time at the helm, Chris. That's so encouraging. And I love the fact that he has been very interested, involved, and vocal about the problems with DOTD before he ever got into the job because, it's great when the biggest critic goes in and has some ideas about how to really turn the ship around.
Very well said. There are two reasons why I'm very comfortable with Joe Donahue as the helm of DOTD. One is that when he was Assistant Attorney General, he expressed a lot of concerns about this project, the way it was going forward, well before he was appointed DOTD. And secondly, Penny Landry, who I know well, and you may have met, who really probably knows more. She's a citizen advocate here in Baton Rouge and probably knows more about this whole process than many of the people who are actually working on it. She is very, very high on Joe Donahue and is very convinced that he's addressing the real issues, which ultimately come down to a couple of things: how our tax dollars are being spent, fiscal efficiency, and the extent to which our lives, both economically and physically, are going to be affected by this project. Joe Donahue is addressing those issues square on, and I think that those are his top priorities as well. So very happy he's there. Needless to say, the complexion of the DOTD is quite a bit different than it was under Sean Wilson. And as far as we're concerned, all for the better.
Yeah, I love that one of his top priorities, even for his own accounting, is accountability to the legislature and to the people. To me, that speaks volumes of him. A lot of people get into these appointments and they suddenly realize that things are not going to be as easy to turn around as they thought from the outside, and they want to cover their own backsides. And it sounds like this is a guy who's really willing to tackle the tough issues, to call it what it is, to be very transparent about the whole thing. And then at the end of the day, if it doesn't work out, let the chips fall where they may. I really love that approach. I think we need a lot more of that in government. And I'm very, very glad to see that we're going to have that. We do have that. And he's going to begin to change the culture of DOTD to really reflect that.
Very, very much so. And to admit, as he said, when he's made a mistake, if he makes a mistake, to admit it. We need more of that in government also. And the last point I wanted to make is when he talked about maintaining a degree of oversight over these contracting firms, even after the projects have begun, with regard to the cost overruns. Oh, we thought it was going to be cost this, but now it's going to cost millions of dollars more because of this. Joe is going to exercise real oversight over these firms even after the contracts have been executed. And I don't think Sean Wilson was doing that. And what do you think what do you think these firms are going to do if they feel like they've got nobody overseeing their costs, nobody overseeing their expenses? They're going to jack it up as much as they can. Of course they are. But I don't think that's going to be happening now, thanks to the oversight that our new DOTD secretary is going to be exercising. So I was very gratified to hear that.
Yeah, it's exciting, for people who are everyday citizens like us, Chris, that drive down the road, can't hold a cup of coffee in their hand and drive down the road because of the potholes. This is music to our ears.
The Alan Seabaugh story. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yes. No doubt. Well, Danielle, it is always a pleasure to be on air with you. It always seems like the time just flies by. It really does. But it's great to be with you today. I never like to close out the show without, first of all, thanking all of our listeners to the State of Freedom for their very generous support, for their donations, and for their listening and subscribing and sharing the State of Freedom, which is rapidly becoming the voice of constitutional conservatism and now common sense in Louisiana. And we could not be doing it without our gracious listeners and supporters.
Yes, and if people are looking for a way to support us or to advertise with us, they can do that at freedomstate.us or send a gift to P.O. Box 861, Berg, Louisiana 70343. And Chris, we are just now getting a very small break, but it's not even really a break from legislative session. It's really just just shifting gears, because now I think last I looked at the legislative website, over 260 bills had been pre-filed, and that was several days ago. So I'm thinking that even more have been filed. We have a ton of work cut out for us. You have a ton of work cut out for you specifically to take a look and analyze a lot of that. So if anyone is looking to support LeCAG to help amplify the voice that we have at the legislature, please, by all means, go sign up for the action alert so you are getting up to the moment information about what is coming before the legislature that may either stand to benefit or harm you as a citizen. We want to be very, very updated and sharp on those. So that's the absolute best place to know what's happening moment by moment during legislative session. But also join LeCAG. You can do that at lecag.org. There is a private Signal group. Signal's an app kind of like Messenger or Telegram for people who haven't heard of Signal. And it's like-minded folks who support our organization and who are part of the effort to take back our state. So we'd highly recommend, highly suggest, highly welcome any donations or membership to LeCAG. And people can also support us, Chris, through a gift by mail to P.O. Box.
P.O. Box 64952, Baton Rouge, Louisiana 70896. And I just want to remind the listeners, Danielle, that we are not on contract with big private special interest donors. We don't get paid by them to do this work. We are funded and supported by the people whose interest we represent and speak for in the legislature, and that is ordinary Louisiana citizens across the state. We do not accept money from big special interest groups, and we never will. And so it is so vitally important that we have the resources that we need to speak, to be, as I say, the German shepherds in the state legislature for ordinary citizens who feel like their voices have not been heard in our state government. As you said, there are hundreds of bills to look at and to review and to make sure are consistent with the Constitution and are consistent with the best interests of Louisiana citizens. So please support us. Please donate generously to LeCAG so that we can compete with the big special interest donors who are going to be down there proselytizing state legislators at the Capitol to try to get them to do their bidding while we fight strictly and solely for Louisiana citizens and for the Constitution. So if 1,000 or 5,000 or 10,000 citizens, Danielle, become members of LeCAG at $22 or $33 a month, we will have more than enough to compete and to make this a level playing field as far as the voice of Louisiana citizens. And it's the best money that you will ever spend, because I can absolutely assure you, we have already made great progress in the legislature. We have already secured the passage of some great legislation and had a firm hand in defeating some very bad legislation. And we want to continue to do that work. So please take the time to go to lecag.org and become a member, and also to sign up for all the action alerts. And if you do that, we will have the resources. And by God's holy grace and discipline and daily focus, we will take another step to preserve the great state of freedom in Louisiana.
Amen. Thanks, Chris.
Amen.
Thanks for listening to The State of Freedom. To stay on top of all the calls to action we mentioned today, just check out the show notes for the episode. If you'd like to support the show financially, visit our website at freedomstate.us. If you'd prefer to give by mail, you can send a check to the State of Freedom, LLC, at P.O. Box 861, Berg, Louisiana 70343. If you own a business in Louisiana and are interested in supporting our show by advertising, please email us at info@freedomstate.us. To get involved with Louisiana Citizen Advocacy Group, visit lacag.org, LACAG.org, or email Chris at chris@lacag.org. If you're enjoying the podcast, please subscribe and share it. Give us a 5-star rating in the reviews. Thanks again, everybody. We'll see you next time.